Hey, if you don't happen to know who I am, my name is Reece and I'm the owner and founder of Define. And today we are going to be covering powder. Now, before we get into powder, I do want to let you know I have foundation primer on, I have my foundation on, and I have concealer on in my under eyes already. So all of that is the prep work, and now we're ready to add on powder and make sure it is sealed for the rest of the day. Because if you're like, Reece, I have issues with my foundation or my concealer sliding throughout the day and you're not using powder, that's why. Powder is going to lock it in for long wear, as well as I feel like it really corrects that color of your foundation to make it look more natural, because sometimes foundation on its own can swing just a little bit yellow or orange depending on which shade you have. So I feel like powder really balances it out and helps a lot, especially if you are like me and you can go in between a couple shades, because I go between an N25 and a C25 in foundation when I'm starting to transition into my spring or summer color. So that's where I'll sometimes use like an N25 in foundation and C25 in powder. But as of right now, I am a full C25 because I have had some time in the sun, which is so nice being somebody who is pale. All my pale girlies, I'm sure you can, relate to that. But here's what you will need on hand for our powder tutorial. There are 3 different brushes we will use, and I will explain the purpose of all of them. So we have the jumbo powder brush, we have the buffer brush, and we have the pro angle brush. I have a little bit of an older version of it, but your guys's will look newer than this. So those are the 3 brushes you're going to want on hand. You're also going to want your shade of powder. And this is a bonus. This is something I've been using lately and absolutely fell in love with, but translucent powder, and I will explain where that goes. But first things first, let's go in with our pro angle brush and the translucent powder. The one area that I like to set the fastest, because it's the most likely to crease, is going to be my under eye. So pretty much with concealer, I'll almost do them eye after eye. So I'll conceal and then put translucent powder on right away, and then I'll do the other eye, conceal, and then put translucent powder on right away. But if your concealer has been sitting for a little while, you can take your finger and just dab it back and forth to kind of smooth it and ensure there's no creasing or lines, because your finger is going to warm that concealer up. So now I'm taking my pro angle brush. I'm going to load up a little bit of my translucent powder. And the reason I've been using translucent powder instead of the pressed powder is I feel like the translucent powder settles a little, little bit better into all those creases in my under eye, because sometimes by the end of the day, if I just use the pressed powder, I feel like there's some cracking going on. But if I use a loose or a loose translucent powder, then I have not noticed it nearly as much, and I feel like it sets it just so much better. So this is an upgrade essentially, but you can totally just use your pressed powder while you're first learning, or maybe if you have you're like, I need to use this powder up before I get translucent as well. That's where translucent is an upgrade, but I have totally noticed the difference, and I think it is absolutely worth it to have. I also feel like it's kind of a lifetime supply based on how much is in there. So I'm going to pat press this eye with my finger or tap it to smooth out that concealer. And then I'm going to pat press. Again, you can see that I dropped my head and I'm looking up like I did when I applied concealer, to really help me ensure that I'm getting in every crease in my under eye. And I'm just pat pressing that everywhere that I had concealer on in my under eye. Now, if you happen to be a darker shade than I currently am, sometimes that translucent powder will look a little bit white. So that's where I'll actually take my pro angle brush, swipe it on a towel, and then on top of the translucent powder, you can apply a little bit of your shade of powder. So I'm loading up my shade of powder, and then you can just pat press that right on top of it to kind of help color correct if you feel like it looks a little too white. But that is where I apply translucent powder. It has been a game changer for me. So that's a little bit of a newer technique compared to what I used to teach. But like I mentioned, you don't have to use translucent powder. You can just use your pressed powder when you're first learning. But if you do want an upgrade and you want to not see any of that creasing in your under eye, highly recommend getting the translucent powder as well. So now we are done with our pro angle brush, so you can put that away. And we are going to move on to our buffer brush. So take your buffer brush, and I kind of use a swirling motion to grab that powder, and then I kind of dab it. So I grab all those little loose granules, and we are going to use this to apply it on everywhere that we place foundation. So pat press everywhere that you have applied your foundation. I'm gonna grab some more powder. I like to go in the same order that I do my foundation, just so I make sure I hit everywhere, especially getting the underside of your nose. So I start in my T-zone, so forehead, nose, chin. Then I'm going to work my way out into my cheeks. And I'm pat pressing, not sliding, because if I were sliding, that powder is not gonna actually have a chance to stick to the foundation. So that's why I pat press when I do my powder. So now I have it applied to my cheek. Make sure you hit up your ears because we did apply foundation there. Same thing on the other side, pat press, making sure you're connecting your cheek to your temple area. I don't know why, but I feel like that's the area I always forget personally on myself. Then we're gonna pat press on the ear. And I like to pat press along my jawline. And then we're going to switch brushes. Now, this again is an optional brush to add on. If you have a more basic set to start with, you don't have to get the jumbo powder brush right away. You can just use the buffer brush and pat press like this. However, I am somebody who likes to make sure that my makeup's done a little bit faster throughout the day. So I feel like the jumbo powder brush really does save me time. So you can either just pat press on your neck with the buffer brush with your powder, or if you happen to be wearing a lower cut shirt, lower cut dress, and you feel like a lot of your neck or décolleté area was where you had to put foundation and you're like, doing a buffer brush is going to take me forever, that's where I like using the jumbo powder brush instead. So I take my jumbo powder brush, I'm going to kind of swirl that to grab the powder, and then it feels like just the most soft teddy bear ever. And I like to use upward sweeping motions to apply that on my neck. You can pat press a little bit too, but I feel like my neck doesn't need as high a coverage as powder as my face does, because my face is more likely, you know, to where I'm sweating or there's more oil, versus my neck, which is not gonna have that. So that's where you can use a little bit more of a sliding motion with the jumbo powder brush to apply this to your neck. And then what I like to do when I was first learning how to do my makeup is I would touch my face, and any area that still felt kind of sticky, that indicated to me that I did not have enough powder. So I would go back in that area and apply more powder. But based on just that quick kind of touch I did, I feel like my face is really well covered. It shouldn't feel sticky, but it should also not feel very cakey or very heavy. If it feels cakey or heavy, you might have used a little bit too much. So make sure that, you know, you're just getting enough powder coverage to where your face isn't sticky, but you're not overdone, if that makes sense. But thank you for joining me for today's tutorial, and I will see you in the next one.